Hey, welcome Anchored Up. I am super excited to finally, I think this is going to be the first episode published, if I'm correct. So I'm super excited to finally get this out to you guys. And I mentioned before, we're going to have guest episodes and pocket-sized episodes. For this pocket-sized episode, we're going to do a pocket-sized series on the Book of Esther. So if you have your Bibles, that's what we're going to be in today. But I just wanted to start off by saying that the guest episodes are coming soon. Have some pretty cool guests coming on, close friends to begin with. So I'm excited for those. But for today, we're going to be opening up our study in the Book of Esther. Now, I decided to do this, and I was like debating whether I should go through the whole book or just kind of hop on and share some things that the Lord spoke to me through the text. But I decided we're going to go through the whole book and do a whole series on it. So I would like to dedicate this episode, though, before we get into chapter 1, to kind of set the scene for you guys, to kind of get the background of the book, the timeline, all that stuff, because I think, at least for me, I can't study the Bible, or I can't read the Bible without studying it and getting all the small details and all that stuff, because I don't know, there's something powerful in seeing how everything connects. And I don't know, it's just super cool when you see the whole Bible, connected like that. So we're going to do that today. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm like bad with geography sometimes. And I think this will help because we're going to get into geography because key places are mentioned. And I want to make sure you guys know where they are in relation to it. So to begin, we're going to be, let me open this up because I do have a little bit of notes to follow along with so we don't get off track, because I don't want to start with chapter 1 and get lost in that. So the historical context, the timeline. It's important to note that the time period, the events of Esther take place around 479, 470 BC. Now, if you study the Bible a lot, you're into the time frame stuff. This might mean something to you, but for most of you, you probably are like, I have no idea what that means. And I was in the same place. So this was during the reign of King Xerxes, the first. His Hebrew name is like long and weird, but we're going to refer to him as King Xerxes. And he's the king of the Persian Empire. He has a pivotal role in the story, so that's a key player to note right here off the beginning. And I don't know if you guys have a study Bible. I have a study Bible, but some of this information might be in your beginning page or two. So if you want to open it up, follow along, because, check me. I want you guys to see this for yourself, because you should never take someone for their word. The Bible is here for you guys to look at, for you guys to study, and I would like you to follow along too. So even if you just have it open, if you don't have a study Bible, kind of flipping through the chapters, getting yourself familiar with it. But where does this fit into the timeline? Because I don't know, you guys probably know, it was before I started the podcast, but I kind of posted some snippets on my study in Nehemiah. Now, Esther is the book right after Nehemiah. And then, I wanted to look into where does this fit in to that, because it's important. So where does Esther fit in to the Bible timeline? Ezra, chapters 1 through 6 is before that. So this is when the first wave of Jews returned to Jerusalem under Zerubbabel, and the temple is rebuilt. So I don't know if you guys remember, some of you might be familiar with when I posted that video a while ago, but there was 3 returns, right? Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. So before Ezra, specifically chapters 1 through 6. Now, Esther's story is going to happen between Ezra 6 and 7. So we have that split, Ezra 1 through 6, and then Esther, the story of Esther, is happening in Ezra 6 and 7. And then after the story of Esther comes Ezra 7, chapter 7 through 10. And in Ezra chapter 7 through 10, this is Ezra's return and his spiritual reform, and then Nehemiah, when he came along on the scenes and built the wall, and the rebuilding process that he led, that all happens after Esther. So, kind of sum it up, the book of Esther comes after Nehemiah in the Bible, but the timeline, it happens before Nehemiah. So it's important to note that so you're not getting, lost in the weeds here. So, it happens before Nehemiah, even though it's written in the Bible after. And it's important to note that I wanted to note this too, because we should see this timeline in here, because we're going to see where the Jews are at this time. If it happened before Nehemiah and Ezra's return, then that means there's still a lot of Jews scattered, right? There's only been one return at the time of Esther, and that's Zerubbabel's. So there's only a small population of Jews that returned to Jerusalem. The rest are still scattered and are in exile throughout the entire Persian Empire. So only some have returned to Jerusalem at this point, and that is important to note. So now I kind of want to move into who is King Xerxes. Well, he's the king of the Persian Empire, but who was before him, right? Who came before him? So Xerxes was the son of Darius. If you're a history nerd, it's Darius the Great. And he ruled in Persia from 522 to 486 BC. Then Cyrus the Great came before Darius. So the king who allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, specifically in Ezra 1. So this guy is the one that allowed the Jews to return and rebuild the temple. So if you want to see big picture, the succession goes as Cyrus, then Darius, then now here we are in Esther with King Xerxes. And then later on, we're going to see after King Xerxes is Artaxerxes the first, which is, he's the king in Nehemiah's time. So you remember, Artaxerxes was the king that Nehemiah was the cupbearer for, the king that let Nehemiah go back to Jerusalem and do this rebuilding project. That was that guy, Artaxerxes. So he comes after Xerxes, which is in Esther. So I know this is a lot of information, but I think it's helpful because you're now seeing how all this fits together. I really wanted you guys to see how Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther kind of fit together. Because sometimes when we study the Bible, I don't know, for me, I always used to study, a book, and I'd separate it from everything else instead of seeing how it intertwined. But it's super cool to see how things intertwine. Now, bringing it fully back to Esther. The location is in Susa, and Susa is the capital of Persia. So it takes place in Susa, a royal city of the Persian Empire. So this is far from Jerusalem. So remember, not all Jews had returned to their homeland, only under Zerubbabel the first return. That's the only thing that's happened so far. So there's a lot of Jews here, living here during this time. And they were living under foreign rule, so things were kind of difficult for them. Now I want to move on to key characters in Esther. If you're flipping through the chapters and you're starting to see some of the titles of the chapters, you're going to see some of these names. So Esther, obviously the book is about her. She's a young Jewish girl raised by her cousin Mordecai. Her parents had died, so her cousin kind of raised her. And we're going to see her important role in this book as she becomes queen, and she's going to use her influence as queen to serve her people, the Jews. Now, I'm not going to get too far into that because we are going to be, as you're going through each chapter of this book. Next is Mordecai. Now, again, Mordecai is a cousin of Esther. He's a devout Jew. He gets into a little bit of trouble here in this book because he's going to refuse to bow to this guy named Haman. Now, before we get to who Haman is, King Xerxes, which I've mentioned already, he is the king, the Persian ruler. He's known for his wealth and his military campaigns. He's this, wealthy ruler in this city. or in this empire. And then Haman, he is an official. He ends up being an official, and he has deep hatred for the Jews. This is where Mordecai runs into trouble. It's with this guy, Haman. They have a little bit of beef, and it causes Haman to make a bad decision, but we see God's hand all over it throughout the story. So, Esther is actually interested in this book in that God is never mentioned, not once. He's not mentioned once or referenced once throughout the entire book. And a lot of people are like, how is God not mentioned in the entire book when we're reading this from the Bible? Like, this is the word of God, right? But we will see that throughout the entire story, a lot of people will say it's full of coincidences, small little coincidences that come on the scene. But as Christians, I want to say it's important to note that we don't believe in coincidence at all. Or we don't believe in coincidence. We believe in God's providence. And we see God's providence on this whole story. His hand is all over it, and he's moving behind the scenes, even though he doesn't feel present. And we will see it. So I encourage you, as we read this book, as we go through the chapters, that you start to see the spaces and places where God's hand is clearly moving. Because when you're aware of it from the beginning, when I study, I like to read through the book kind of quick first, kind of get overview, not much details, just a quick read, like you're reading any other book, right? Flipping the page, right? And then I like to go back and actually study it. So if you do that and you make yourself aware of like, hey, God's working behind the scenes, you're going to start to see it as you read through each chapter. So I encourage you to do that. And it's amazing because we see the Jewish population in danger here. And seeing how God used someone to save his people it blows my mind how it plays out. But some major themes and takeaways. In this book, like I mentioned, you're going to see God's providence when he may seem silent. So the Book of Esther is unique because of this. God's name is never mentioned. But his hand is all over, and it's evident that he's in every moment. So this teaches us that God is always working, even when we can't see him or necessarily hear him. We might be going through time where we feel like he's silent to us, but he's still working behind the scenes. He's never going to leave us. He has plans for us, a hope in a future, and he's going to continue to do a work, even when we may not see it. And then, secondly, another major theme is purpose and position. God may have placed you in a position where he's going to use you for his purpose. We may not see it. We may not know why we have this position or this, why we're put in this place in this specific time, but God has a purpose in it. A lot of people reference the book of Esther, like they write sermons. You can find them all over online on YouTube. And a lot of them are titled "For Such a Time as This." And we can look at it and it's kind of like cliche, but for real, like God placed Esther for such a time as this. And I believe that he may have placed you in a position that he's going to allow you to serve his purpose. So that's another encouraging thing. God often places us in positions in families and jobs or schools for his divine purpose. And if we want to be used and we want to step in his purpose, then we have to be aware and in contact with him and communicating with him daily so we can play that out. It shouldn't just be we shouldn't just live for our personal comfort. I don't know about you, but I want to live for the kingdom, for his purposes for my life, because I know they're way better than I could ever write up for myself. And then last one, the courage to speak up. We see here that if Esther or Mordecai did not speak up, did not stand strong in their belief, both of them played a pivotal role in this. If either one of them did not stand strong in their belief, did not have the courage to speak up, then the whole population of Jews could have been annihilated. So they both risked their life, but specifically Esther risked her life to approach the king without being summoned. Because during this time, if you approached the king and you weren't summoned to him, it's a serious crime at the time. You could be killed. I mentioned that back in Nehemiah when he approached the king. They asked if he could, go help his people and rebuild in Jerusalem. So her story really shows the importance of boldness, trust in God's timing in it, and putting trust in his plan, in God's plan, even when it's dangerous or uncomfortable and we may not feel like it. So there actually is another theme I want to kind of mention. Shows divine reversal. Haman and Mordecai, we'll probably get into this later, but you see like a lot of things reversed. I don't want to spoil anything, but keep an eye out for that as well. And then we're going to see celebration and remembrance of the Jews' deliverance from this horrible decree. And it ends up becoming a holiday called Purim. We'll talk about later once we get into it. I forget what chapter it's in, but we'll get into why it's called Purim. And yeah, it's a joyful reminder of God's hand and how he saved them and how he's preserved his people. So those are some big overview points that I wanted to get into, right? So we got the time frame of this, the historical context, the king that is in place in this time, the kings before, the kings after, and then all the pivotal and important people to note in the story. So that's a wrap on our very first episode. Thanks for watching or listening if you made it this far, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned, and I hope things made more sense, kind of getting in the background and the overview before we jump into it. I did notice that when we were recording, the internet cut out, so I think what's going to happen is we're going to end up separating it into two parts. So not next week, because I think next week's going to be a guest episode, but the week after, I'll probably roll out the second part, and it'll continue the background, kind of the overview of the Book of Esther, specifically, though, the geography and the two empires that were in play at this time. So if you want to tune in again for the Book of Esther, we're going to be going through the whole thing, chapter 1 through the entirety of the book. So if you want to join me on the journey in it, I think it will be super cool. And like I mentioned in this episode, be aware and be on the lookout for how God is moving behind the scenes, because you're going to see it. Remember, as Christians, we don't put our faith, we don't believe in coincidences, but we believe in God's providence and his hand moving behind everything. So thanks for tuning in. See you next time.